Yeah, right.
Just got this. That's why it was a couple minutes delayed. What was that, Brennan? Okay. I'm not sure I should take that. I have to think about that. I'll give this one of these to you, man. Thank you. Thank you all again for joining us for the tour of NJ Transit's Emergency Operations Center. It reminds me, I said this to Kevin, it reminds me of the traffic management center that we have in Woodbridge, in the sense that it's multi-discipline and you get an ability to get real-time sense of lots of different locations and aspects, including, I'm not sure you mentioned this in passing, but things like the Port Authority bus traffic. So really impressive. I want to thank NJ Transit Executive Director Kevin Corbett, who we'll hear from in a minute. NJ Transit Police Chief, thank you to you and your colleagues for my way cool pullover here. Chris Trusillo for showing us around, and all of your colleagues, the men and women here, for their work to keep NJ Transit running day in and day out and keeping it safe day in and day out. Again, a particular shout out I mentioned ago to our host mayor and dear friend, Maplewood Mayor Vic DeLuca. As we sort of alluded to already, the Emergency Operations Center is a crucial link in restoring NJ Transit to the level of safety and reliability that commuters deserve and expect. We have to remember that NJ Transit is more than just the engineers, the bus operators, and the others we meet face-to-face every day, and they are incredibly important, let there be no doubt. But NJ Transit is also the folks here behind the scenes, monitoring the system, watching for trouble spots, directing resources when needed to ensure a quick response to minimize delays, and, as you also saw, communicating directly with commuters. Whether it's a local incident that delays one train or an emergency situation near a hub that can impact entire lines, the men and women here at the EOC play an important role in making this system work for commuters. And when we increase investment in NJ Transit by $100 million, as we aim to do in our budget, we are investing in our commuters. But we're also investing in the men and women here at the EOC, whose job it is to backstop our mass transit system and ensure commuters are kept informed. Let me say that I agree with those who would like to see us invest even more in NJ Transit. As we begin our budget negotiations, I will listen closely to their ideas, and where they are sensible, consider me open. But one thing we can't do, and this is a little bit of I want to take a quick 30-second detour. One thing we can't do is simply look at our surplus as a pot of money to be rated. The surplus is our state's essentially rainy day fund. Every dollar we take away from our rainy day fund, no matter how well-intentioned we think the cause may be, is a dollar we won't have for things like hurricane response, to clean up a major chemical spill, God forbid, cushion a national economic recession, or to respond to a dictate from Washington that we had budgeted for. Our rainy day fund is what we would look to in the event of a catastrophic failure, please God no, of the tunnels under the Hudson River. Quite simply, we have no other safety net. We all need to recognize this simple fact. Folks at home understand the need for fiscal responsibility. They can't spend what they don't have. They know how critical a rainy day fund is even when the sun is shining. We need to extend that common sense to Trenton. We are committed to climbing out of the deep hole in which we found ourselves when we started on this journey 14 plus months ago. This was a system that was defunded at one point from the state by 90%. We will fix this system, and the work of the professionals here at the EOC is a critical part of this mission. But we must do so responsibly. As with so many of the challenges we face, we have to resist the urge to use fiscally unsound quick fixes that open as many problems as they claim to close. To our commuters, I am committed to restoring NJ Transit. To the men and women of NJ Transit, whether they work in a rail yard, drive a bus, or monitor the system here at the EOC, I am committed to growing our investment in you. As I said, we're climbing out of a deep, deep hole dug by years of fiscal mismanagement, and disinvestment. And I will not risk us falling back down inside that hole. Thank you. It is now my honor to bring up for a few words the Executive Director of NJ Transit, the one and only Kevin Corbett.
Hold the applause.
Thank you all for coming out here. I think, the governor has pointed out that he expects us to be the best-in-class transit system in the country. When I came in, I was fully expected that there was nothing that would prevent us from doing that. We had the right management and the right resources. And I think, if you look at what the hard steps we've taken over the last year, I think this is a perfect example of where if you have the right resources with the right people and you break down some of the silos that we mentioned inside, that we can be first in class, and that the customer experience, aside from making sure that safety is paramount, that they have a good, safe trip, is that also that we can communicate. And that was one thing the governor stressed last year. In the emergency, I think New Jersey Transit does well in emergency ops, and that's where we need to take that emergency op experience and bring it down to the day-to-day non-emergency operation. And right now we are operating and the reduced status currently, so that we can be accurate. Yeah, exactly.
Let's just check.
Thank you. And that, and we are looking to morph that into a regular, similar situation, scale down in Newark, to have that. So for day-to-day communications, everyone can real time get that information out, and that people can deal with the situations as they come up, and knowing that they can get instantaneous response. So with the right resources and the right people, we can deliver what the governor has promised. The chief has their particular questions, and there are also room afterwards on some of the details. Can certainly do that, and I think Nancy, there also for some people want to take a look later. There's another shots or something, we can arrange that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Chief. We'll take a few questions. Also, I neglected to acknowledge Dean Duffus, councilman, also from Maplewood. Thank you guys for representing us, your community, so well in the state. Brenda.
Metro North has a substantial number of extra engineers, and it's been suggested that perhaps some of them who are former NJ Transit engineers might, with a refresher course, be able to help with the shortage that NJ Transit's experiencing, particularly the west of Hudson lines, past Pack Valley and Port Jervis. Is that a possibility, especially with the summer coming in?
Yep. I'll let Kevin answer the specific question. The frame for that, as you know, is that we inherited a reality at NJ Transit thanks to disinvestment, not just in dollars, in capital and rolling stock and things like this center, but also in training. And so the overall pool of engineers available every day was allowed to drift to a razor-thin margin of error. We currently have 6 engineering classes ongoing, 4 of which will graduate this year. I'll defer to Kevin as to how we can take some of the Metro North surplus and bring them over to the Jersey side.
Brenda, we looked at that. We have a very good working relationship with Metro North. Kathy Rinaldi, the president, is a good friend personally. We looked at that. There were a handful of engineers who did go over or left New Jersey Transit, not as many as sort of rumors had out there. And there are different unions and seniority, so there are a number of issues we tried to work through. And for the handful, if you look at trying to get them trained, bring them back to get them trained, the training time that it would take would be past the time when we have our own engineers coming up. So we looked at it, worked closely and collaboratively with them, but it didn't work.
Please.
Governor, could you give us an example of an emergency type of situation that would take place and how this setup is going to benefit New Jersey now, the way we have it configured, versus what it was before you said, hey, everybody in the emergency?
Yeah, so I'll ask the chief to come up because, and he referred to this in the other room, and that was around Superstorm Sandy, what we didn't have then and what we have now. I see it more in the traffic center. So this is my first visit here. I promise you it won't be my last. But that's when there's a snowstorm. As you know, I control the weather, so I go right to invariably right to Woodbridge and have a similar setup with multidiscipline, multifunctional, multi-location. Huge benefit, huge leg up in my ability to manage it and stay close to it. Chief, a couple of words on what we have now that we didn't have before.
Well, just the scalability for one thing. I mean, that's a big space where if we had an incident that was a regional incident, a big incident, we have space to bring regional partners in. You may remember in 2017, the Penn Station work was very impactful for us and very impactful for the, I'm pointing to the mayor and his community and many other communities. We were able to invite those communities to have a representative in here. We were able to invite, and we had an Amtrak representative in here. This way we had that situational awareness that we need. Weather events are another good example of being ready to prepare for a weather event and then being ready to mitigate the impact of that weather event by having everybody in here. And then you heard me, or you may have heard me inside mention a planned event like St. Patrick's Day and New Year's Eve and July 4th. We're going to have everybody in this space to work those events.
As a Murphy, I was particularly struck by the St. Patrick's example. Please.
Senator Weinberg came to the NJ Transit Board meeting last week and basically raised some funding concerns on behalf of her and Steve Sweeney as far as NJ Transit goes. Just wanted to know, have you spoken to either one of them? Have you addressed those concerns? And as an amount to come up for additional funding for the agency?
So I've just said in my remarks this morning, I've said this in private and in public, we're all ears to sensible further investment in NJ Transit. That's the last. We're up from, I think we inherited the state before I got here was investing $167 million. 142, excuse me, in its the last year of the Christie administration. This year we are at 407 million and a half dollars. So that's up from 142 to 407 and a half in 14 or 15 months. So let's just make sure we all acknowledge that's a huge moving of the needle. But I'm very much open. I've said this publicly and privately, but we have to do it in a responsible way, not just the investments that we make. And we think about this in the broader sense and how can we get ahead of NJ Transit just like we've been able to get ahead of public education historically in our state. We would love nothing more than to do that as opposed to being, I think we're getting there. We inherited a system that was dragging us along. We're now leading that system thanks to Kevin and the chief and other, the men and women who run this every day. But as long as we have to be able to find the revenues to fund that. So sustainable revenue matters. We presented a budget with $1.1 billion of sustainable year-over-year cost savings that nobody thought was possible. And in fact, there are even more savings on top of that. Some are one-time through Medicaid, some are sustainable. We proposed a millionaire's tax as we think, a very smart, stable, consistent revenue source. So as long as we can find sensible fiscal sources to fund that increased transit, color me as open-minded. Please.
So last week, Senator Menendez made the announcement that they want to put the Portal Bridge during key periods of transportation. And I think that afternoon, the Federal Rail Administration came out with a list of priorities of projects. The Portal Bridge and the Gateway Tunnel, once again, ranked medium to low. How do you change that so that the federal dollars?
Yeah, I'm sure politics isn't at play there, right? It's only 20% of the nation's economy, literally, that rides on the rails between Washington and Boston, 20% of the United States GDP. So frustrating. I continue to be optimistic. There was a very good Gateway Development Corporation meeting in Washington last week where Matt Platkin, our Chief's Counsel, represented us, both U.S. senators from New Jersey and New York, the leadership of the Gateway Development Corporation, Port Authority, NJ Transit. Kevin was there. There's a lot of momentum to get this going. When you talk about gateways, you and I have discussed, it's a family of projects that adds up to a really big number. But you can also look at it as a discrete series of projects, all of which are important, and the whole family needs to be funded. Let's not question that. But for instance, can we find creative ways to get the ball rolling on the Portal Bridge, which is shovel ready? Again, as you and I have discussed, there's a lot of momentum building around notions like that. Very good working relationship with our federal delegation, including New York's, both sides of the aisle, with Governor Cuomo and his administration, the Port Authority, NJ Transit, Amtrak, hugely important in here. So I read that rating and I get a little, dispirited. I say, come on, you got to be kidding me. This is 20% of the nation's economy, which also gives me some optimism that cooler heads will prevail. I saw the president a couple of weeks ago. We're still trying to sit down. Our chief of staff was on with the White House a couple of days ago. We're trying to find a path forward, but it's more frustrating than I'd like. Please. Shocking.
So I have Stack, your Senator Stack, Starlow, Gill, Senator Rice, Cooley, Maddox, and Jackson, Donna, and Beach, on marijuana. Which of those 10 people?
You and I have had a good history of counting noses on these things. I won't get into specific names. We still have a ways to go. Let me just say that. We're working the phones hard. We all have to pull our weight. I have no reason to believe we all are not, but it's going to be an all-in. It's going to take a village to get this one done. So it's going to need to be the Senate President front and center, the Assembly Speaker front and center. I should say in the Senate, Senator Scuteri, who's doing a great job. Myself front and center. None of us can take any vote for granted, and we're not there yet. And I have to say, I remind everybody who's looking at this who may have some skepticism, the status quo, if we don't get this done, our kids are exposed. There are huge racial injustices. The bad guys run the business and they make all the money. So we have a chance to protect our kids. This is 21 years up and older. We're not inventing marijuana, by the way. That exists. 21 years and up. Take the business from the bad guys and put it into the good guys and gals' hands. Regulate it. Undo it historically, unlike any state in America, enormous steps in social justice. Folks are asking for things that I would like as well that are not achievable at the moment. But this is a huge step in undoing enormous inequities that have built up over decades. And so that's the choice we have. The status quo, if you want to leave your kids exposed, marijuana's not going away. The bad guys will run the business. And by the way, when they open their coat up, it won't just be pot, it'll be everything else. Versus regulate it, 21 and up, undo decades of social injustices, put the business into the hands of the good guys and gals. It's a black and white decision for me.
One more? Can you follow up on that?
No, I love you, but no, Max. Sorry.
Back to the operations center for a moment. For the average person who rides NJ Transit, who may be frustrated by delays, frustrated by cancellations, what does this do for them? How are you monitoring things that could help them? And if they do have an issue, how does the social media part of this play into the
Just in the interest of time, I'm going to practice without a license here, guys. There's enormous value to having everything in one room. You see that, I mentioned a minute ago, you see that in storm management, and you see it in the logistical management of NJ Transit, bus and rail, by the way, as well as adjacent authorities and entities like what's going on at Penn Station without regard to whether or not it's NJ Transit. The Port Authority bus movement you've seen. So it gives Kevin and his team and the chief and his team real-time, unsiloed, 360-degree sense of exactly what's going on. The communication pod, which was sort of off behind us and back to our right, is a particular example of the war room mentality that we didn't have before. And Dan Bryan went in there and sort of on a skunk works project for several weeks, helped with Kevin and his team to pull that together. So this is a sitting around a table, sharing information real time, and then the last piece, much more aggressively going to commuters. As opposed to making you find us, we increasingly are finding you. Like everything else, we're not all the way there yet, but that is a quick summary of what I think the benefits give us. So just maybe one more in the back, because I know you had your hand up. On or off, sorry. Oh my God, hold on.
The next round of this, how will that impact service?
So again, we're still looking, you haven't asked it, the Atlantic City line and the Princeton Dinky, May 24th, and I talk to Kevin almost every day to see if we can make that May 23rd. Or even better, but May 24th. And I guess, Kevin, real quick on positive train controls, ongoing impacts, including in the summer.
Yep. At this point, the only impact, we're in constant testing mode. So it's testing and make sure the testing is so perfect that we can be then 100% in total positive train control and running exclusively in positive train control. But it won't affect them much other than we have to have engineers doing the testing, and that we have a shortage of engineers. But otherwise, they will not feel it. We have a small group graduating in May, about 8, but then starting in October, we'll have, it depends how many graduate, between 25, 30, which is the critical mass.
May I just say, I believe that the engineering class size is more of a summer risk than positive train control.
Yes,
Is that fair to say?
right.
So in other words, we're building this pool up as aggressively as we can, but we're not going to be in the promised land by Memorial Day. So I cut off. I'm being overly generous today. Please remember this moment.
But I think the issue that a lot of these people that he mentioned have is the expungement section, that it's too cumbersome, it's too much of a process.
So here is the reality on expungement. If we could do automatic, nobody that I know, certainly not me, is opposed to automatic expungement. That's something we all would like to be able to flip a switch and you're expunged. It turns out, just for a whole host of technical, logistical reasons, where these convictions lay and what files they're in, that's not at the moment possible. Although I had a conversation last night with our Chief Innovation Officer, who is all in on trying to accelerate this. So in the absence of automatic, again, which we would love, but I'm begging everybody, let's not let perfect be the enemy of the really good. There are two avenues. Number one, you affirmatively, if you've been subject to a conviction consistent with what's being expunged, you affirmatively take an action. That action is fairly straightforward. It's not yet online. We're promising in the bill, I believe, that it'll be online within 9 months. I hope we could beat that. As I mentioned to a group of urban mayors on a call today, Monday, if we are successful, is not the end of history. So if we're successful, let's get by Monday and then color me, from me on down in the administration, all in on getting this as smooth as possible and as ironed out as possible. In the absence of the affirmative action that you or I didn't yet take, there is something called virtual expungement in this bill. And virtual expungement is real, and the penalties for folks violating that are real, I think to the tune of $10,000, which is obviously a big amount of money. And when I say this, just as you cannot or I cannot be discriminated against for a job, education, health care, whatever it might be, on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, preference, etc., this will be in that same category. You cannot be discriminated against. And then ultimately, you or I, if we're in this category, we will ultimately take the affirmative action, and at that point, you're over the goal line. Can we find ways to try to automate this? If we get this successful, we're going to do everything we can to do it. We're not there yet, but that's describing it. And the penalties on the virtual expungement side are real, and they are intended to have serious teeth, just like you can't be discriminated against for those other characteristics. Thank you all. I want to thank Kevin. I want to thank the chief, Vic, and councilmen, other members of NJ Transit, men and women. Thank you so much, members of the press, for coming out. We'll see you soon. Good job, man. Thanks, Chief. Let's go. Hey, man.